We've been talking a lot lately about the Republican Party's abandonment of their once sacredly held values of individual rights, individual liberty, and the freedom, to choose as long as you're not harming another person, the freedom to choose what's done with your own body. And I think this clip highlights that exact abandonment that we've been highlighting over here. This is a resurfaced clip of Charlie Kirk at one of his rallies where he's talking to someone who is the victim of both rape and incest, who ended up keeping her baby. Check this out.
I was raped by my father, and I chose not to have an abortion, and this is what came out of it.
I'm very sorry that happened to you. That is incest and rape. And tell us your little one's name.
This is Jonah.
And Jonah's a miracle from God.
He is.
But it was a terrible thing that happened to you. What is your message to people that say babies conceived in rape are not human beings?
They are absolutely human beings. They are made individually by God, and they can do some very important things. I believe that he'll grow up and he'll help people, and based on all of our experiences, we can try and keep them from doing the same thing that their parents did.
Praise God. Jonah is alive because of your courage, and you turned something evil into something good. So God bless you, and thank you so much. Hi, Jonah. You want a hat, Jonah?
Yes, please.
God bless you. Thank you.
I don't know of a single person, nor have I heard of a single person who believes that babies conceived in rape are not human beings. Charlie Kirk just made that up. That's not any stance that I think anyone on the left holds, any Democrat, any progressive. It's just pure, he just made that up. It's plain and simple. Mike, what do you make of this stance that we see echoed here by the late Charlie Kirk? And I think it's just a good representation of the conservative movement at large, the Republican Party at large, of, they're cheering on this woman that seemingly in their mind made the right choice of having the child, which I don't think anyone on the left has an issue with. I think the issue here is more about the forced choice, or removing that choice, removing that freedom from a woman, which the right wants to push, at least a lot of conservative people. They want to remove the right to an abortion, especially for all cases, including incest, rape, if the mother is at risk from the pregnancy itself. What do you make of just this highlight of this resurfaced clip that sort of shows this whole abortion controversy resurfaced?
So I was raised Christian and deeply conservative. Over the years, I've fallen away from both. And I would say that I understand where a lot of the right comes from with their argument here. But I think at the end of the day, even though I'm still not a fan of abortion, I don't like it. I don't think that it's necessarily a good thing. But I think the freedom to choose is a good thing. And I think it all boils down to personal autonomy, It's the woman's body. She's being forced to carry this to term, especially if it's from a rape or, incest or anything like that, or in this case, both. Because I've also never heard anybody, whether they're Democrat or even Republican, say that children who are the results of a rape or incest, they're not human beings. That definitely sounds fabricated and made up on the spot for sure. And it sucks that people I don't know how many people absorb that and believe it to be true, but the fact that it's even being pushed out there is absurd, because I don't have an issue with this woman choosing to raise this child and to carry the child to term. That's not a problem. That's her choice. If she wants to have that baby, even though it's, very traumatic for both her and the baby, so be it. That's her choice. That's her family. She can do what she wants. No problem there. But to force others who don't want that to have that, I think that's where the huge disconnect is. And it's also very interesting to me that Republicans are very very hardcore about being pro-life. We're pro-life. We're pro-life. We're pro-life. But at the same time, many of those pro-life people are also pro-death penalty or they're pro bombing, terrorists, or, whatever. These boat bombings that have been happening recently out in the Caribbean, it's, isn't that life? We're killing people. So, yet these people, they're drug dealers. It doesn't matter. So clearly a lot of people who have the pro-life stance, they have their own buckets that, if these people are in this category, then their life doesn't matter. And I think it's also very ironic how, I think there's a common idea on the left where, the right believes that, up until the baby is born, they must be protected at all costs. We must do everything we can to protect them. But the moment they pop out of the womb, now they're on their own. They have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. No assistance for them. Get it together, And we see this echoed through policy with the Trump administration freezing funds for school lunches and things like that, but also for the SNAP benefits. And SNAP, the primary recipient of SNAP benefits, the kids may not be buying the groceries themselves, but they're for households that have children. So children are a big part of the SNAP program. And for the Trump administration to, willfully and happily, cut through these SNAP programs and also withhold emergency funding that was court ordered by a federal judge saying, look, you have emergency funds for this reason, use it. And they refused. So yeah, I don't know, Emmanuel. There's a lot to say. And I think that when it comes to the right, even though I understand where they're coming from, I understand the sentiment, it also just blows my mind, like you said, that they have this glaring contradiction of, we want personal rights, personal freedom, but a right to choose. No. That can't be allowed. It doesn't make sense to me.
You're right. The right seems to only care about life up until birth, whereas the left seems to care about life throughout the life of the individual. The right does not fight for universal health care. The right does not fight for paid family leave. The right does not fight for paid education. The right does not fight for higher wages. All of these things that I just listed are policy proposals and platforms of the left. You don't see these being championed by MAGA, by Republicans, by the right almost ever. These are staples of the left. So who is the true pro-life party? I would say it's the Democrat Party, but more specifically the left end of the ideological spectrum, because, I mean, one could argue both parties are corrupt, and they certainly are to one degree. But if we're just talking pure ideology, the left seems to be in favor of pro-life through the end of the life of the human being, from birth, pre-birth, all the way up to, wanting them to live as long as possible. That's why the left wants universal health care, because they don't want you to go bankrupt when you have a medical emergency that you didn't foresee, when you want to go have a baby and you can't afford the $30,000 pregnancy. The left wants you to have babies. That's pro-life to me. What do you think, Mike?
I agree. The left definitely has more policies aimed towards protecting people throughout their lives, especially if you're a minority or something too. Like, let's not forget that as well. Immigrant babies, birthright citizenship, all these things are about protecting people's rights. And I understand that, there's definitely an argument that comes from the left saying, oh, well, a fetus isn't a life, a fetus is just a clump of cells and whatever. That's all up for debate. I'm not trying to say that the abortion debate is meaningless or decided. There is room for debate. But I think that because there's room for debate, to me, it feels like the safest option is to opt for liberty. We should say, hey, because we're not sure, then let's grant people the right to choose and have freedom before we clamp down and actually say, no, this is murder, blah, blah, blah. But up until that is proven to be the case unequivocally and the debate has ended, then I think we're just trampling on rights. And I want to highlight something else that you mentioned earlier about how this is part of the right seeming to move away from their once sacred held values and things like that. And obviously the right has been sort of having this momentum for several years now. They've had an agenda. They've been pushing this agenda for decades, but now MAGA is sort of the culmination of this. And MAGA is not traditional right-wing politics at all. George Bush and Donald Trump's policies are wildly different, and they're not that far apart. So it is interesting to see how quickly the right has abandoned their own stances and how blindly they do it, because they are very committed to Trump's MAGA policies, even though it goes against things. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, Trump has at least traditionally has been pro-choice. He used to be a Democrat. So it's just very interesting how you can see this change within the Republican Party happening somewhat quickly, and most of them are completely oblivious to it. There's only recently have we seen this big MAGA civil war that's kind of unfolding before our eyes, with all this infighting going on, and how the Republican Party is literally clawing itself to death at the moment, where Marjorie Taylor Greene, and a lot of other Republicans are announcing that they're no longer going to be running for Congress. You have the Heritage Foundation, which has a full-blown revolution going on. They're the authors of Project 2025. These are the people that ushered in the policies that the administration is pushing. And within less than a full year of that administration being sworn in, you've got that entire foundation splitting at its core. And you've got obviously big pundits and talking heads like Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson. They're all at each other's throats. And now you have Erica Kirk sort of rising in Charlie's place, and she's caught up in all this as well. So there's a lot of infighting. There's a lot of, I guess, heated debate to try to determine what are our values. But it's just interesting to see that this happens during an administration. Obviously the campaigns and Republicans are very traditional with towing the party line and voting for whatever candidate they want. But to now sit here and kind of implode is very interesting. And I think that's a direct result of what you're talking about, Emmanuel, how they're just moving further and further and further right, and completely abandoning the views they once held.